Captain Sarah Mitchell stepped off the bus at Naval Station Norfolk on a humid Tuesday morning in June. At 42 years old, with silver streaks threading through her dark hair, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Her uniform was crisp, her posture perfect, but she wore no visible rank insignia, just plain service khakis like any junior officer might wear. The guard at the gate barely glanced at her temporary ID badge before waving her through. "Administration buildings that way, ma'am," he said, pointing without much interest. Sarah had requested this assignment herself. After 20 years commanding operations from behind desks and aboard flagships, she wanted to see how things really worked at the ground level. So she'd arranged a month-long inspection tour, going undercover as a newly transferred logistics officer. Only the base commander knew her true identity. She walked across the sun-bleached parking lot toward Building 7, where she'd be working with the supply division. Inside, the air conditioning hit her like a wall of cold air. A young petty officer at the front desk looked up from his computer. "Help you?" he asked. "I'm Lieutenant Mitchell, reporting for temporary duty," Sarah said, using her old rank from years ago. The petty officer checked his list. "Oh yeah, you're the one filling in while Commander Davis is out, third door on the left. Good luck." Something in his tone suggested she'd need it. Sarah found the office easily enough. Through the window in the door, she could see 3 people inside, 2 men and 1 woman, all in their 30s, clustered around a desk and laughing about something. She knocked and entered. The laughter died immediately. 3 pairs of eyes turned toward her, their expressions shifting from amusement to barely concealed annoyance. "Can we help you?" asked the taller of the 2 men. His name tape read Phillips. He had the confident air of someone who'd been running things his own way for a long time. "I'm Lieutenant Mitchell. I'm assigned here for the next month while Commander Davis is away." The woman, Lieutenant Chen, exchanged a look with Phillips. "Nobody told us we were getting a babysitter." "I'm not here to babysit anyone," Sarah said calmly. "Just here to help out and learn your processes." The second man, Lieutenant Rodriguez, leaned back in his chair. "Learn our processes? Ma'am, no offense, but where are you coming from? What's your background?" "I've been in administration mostly," Sarah said, sticking to her cover story. "Desk work." Phillips actually laughed. "Desk work? And they sent you here. Do you have any idea what we do? This isn't pushing papers. We coordinate supply chains for 12 ships and 3 squadrons. We handle millions of dollars in equipment. We work with contractors, overseas suppliers, emergency requisitions." "I'm sure I'll pick it up," Sarah interrupted gently. Chen shook her head. "This is typical. They always send us people who don't know what they're doing. Last month it was some ensign fresh out of school. Now it's someone from a desk job." "I'll try not to get in your way," Sarah said. She kept her voice level, but she was making mental notes. The disrespect wasn't surprising. She'd expected some of it, but the arrogance was telling. Phillips pointed to a desk in the corner, half buried under old manuals and supply catalogs. "That's your spot. We've got a shipment audit due Friday. You can start by reconciling these inventory reports." He dropped a thick folder on the desk. Dust puffed up from it. Sarah sat down and opened the folder. The reports inside were a mess, pages out of order, coffee stains, half the numbers illegible. This was busy work, meant to keep her occupied and out of their hair. For the rest of that first day, Sarah worked quietly in her corner while the others talked and joked among themselves, pointedly excluding her. She listened carefully to their conversations. They talked about shortcutting procedures, about vendors who gave them special deals, about requisitions that went through faster when you knew the right people. At one point, Chen was on the phone with a supplier, her voice friendly and familiar. "Yeah, same as last time. Just make sure the paperwork shows the higher amount. We split the difference like always." Sarah's hands stilled on her keyboard. She kept her expression neutral and continued working, but her mind was racing. If she was hearing what she thought she was hearing, this wasn't just inefficiency or corner cutting. This was fraud. At 5 o'clock, Philip stood up and stretched. "We're heading to Mickey's bar. There's a group of us that goes every Tuesday." He didn't invite Sarah. None of them did. They simply left, leaving her alone in the office. Sarah sat in the quiet room for a moment, then pulled out her phone. She dialed a secure number. "Admiral's office," came the crisp voice on the other end. "This is Hummingbird," Sarah said, using her code name. "I need to extend my timeline here. There's something going on that needs a closer look." "Understood, ma'am. How long do you need?" Sarah looked at the mess of paperwork on her desk, thought about the phone call she'd overheard, and felt her jaw tighten. "Give me 2 weeks and keep my cover intact. Nobody can know." The rest of the first week followed the same pattern. Phillips, Chen, and Rodriguez treated Sarah like an unwelcome burden, someone to be tolerated but never included. They gave her meaningless tasks, filing old reports, updating spreadsheets that nobody would ever look at, making coffee runs. Sarah accepted it all without complaint. She filed papers and watched. She made coffee and listened. She stayed late when the others left, and that's when she did her real work. On Thursday night, alone in the office, Sarah began going through the filing cabinets. She found 3 years of supply requisitions, maintenance requests, and vendor contracts. The more she read, the clearer the picture became. Someone had been skimming money from the Navy for a long time. The scheme was clever but not complicated. They'd order supplies at inflated prices, split the difference with corrupt vendors, and pocket the cash. The paperwork was doctored just enough to pass a casual inspection, but not a thorough one. Sarah photographed documents with her phone. She made careful notes. She was building a case, but she needed to know everyone involved. Was it just these 3, or did it go higher? On Friday morning, Sarah arrived early. She was making coffee when Phillips walked in, looking surprised to see her. "You're here early," he said. "Wanted to get a head start on that audit you mentioned," Sarah replied. Phillips's expression clouded. "Actually, that audit got postponed. We've got something else for you today." He handed her a stack of papers. "These requisitions need to be entered into the system. Should keep you busy." Sarah took the papers and returned to her corner desk. But she noticed something. Phillips seemed nervous. He kept glancing at her, then at his computer screen, then back at her. Around 10 o'clock, Chen's phone rang. Sarah could hear her side of the conversation. "Yes, sir, no, sir, the new lieutenant, well, she's not really contributing much, to be honest. She doesn't have the background for this kind of work. Yes, sir, I understand." When Chen hung up, she looked at Phillips. "That was Commander Davis. He's coming back early. He'll be here Monday." Rodriguez whistled. "That's sudden. Did something happen?" "He didn't say, but he asked about our new addition." Chen glanced at Sarah. "I told him the truth." Sarah kept typing, but her mind was working fast. Commander Davis coming back early could be good or bad. She didn't know if he was involved in the fraud. Her background check on him had been clean, but that didn't mean much. That afternoon, Sarah made a mistake, or rather, she pretended to. She was carrying a stack of files across the office when she stumbled, sending papers flying everywhere. As she and the others scrambled to pick them up, Sarah made sure that several documents from her investigation ended up mixed with the regular files. "I'm so sorry," she said, flustered. "I've got them." But Phillips had picked up one of the papers, a requisition form with handwritten notes in the margin. Sarah had marked the discrepancies herself during her late-night investigation. Phillips stared at the paper, his face going pale. "Where did this come from?" "I don't know. It was just in the stack," Sarah said innocently. Phillips looked at Chen and Rodriguez. Something unspoken passed between them. "Lieutenant Mitchell, can you step outside for a minute? We need to discuss something." Sarah left the office and stood in the hallway. Through the door, she could hear raised voices but couldn't make out the words. After 5 minutes, the door opened. Chen stood there, her expression hard. "Lieutenant, we need to talk about your performance here. You've been making a lot of mistakes. You don't seem to understand our procedures. We're going to have to recommend that you be reassigned." "I see," Sarah said quietly. "May I ask what specific mistakes I've made?" "You're just not a good fit," Phillips said from behind Chen. "It happens. No hard feelings. but we think it's best if you transfer out before Commander Davis returns." Sarah met his eyes. She saw fear there, disguised as authority. They were trying to get rid of her before she could discover anything else. "I'd prefer to stay and see my assignment through," Sarah said. "It's not really up to you," Rodriguez chimed in. "We've already put in the paperwork. You'll get your orders tomorrow or Monday at the latest." Sarah nodded slowly. "I understand. Well, if those are my last few days, I'll try to make them count." She returned to her desk, and the three of them watched her warily for the rest of the afternoon. Sarah worked quietly, seemingly defeated, but inside her mind was sharp and focused. They'd just made a critical mistake. By trying to force her out, they'd confirmed their guilt, and they'd given her the weekend to make her move. That night, Sarah sat in her temporary housing unit and made phone calls to the base commander, to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, to her chief of staff back at her real command. "Monday morning," she told them. "Have everyone in place by 0800. We're bringing this whole thing down." She spent the weekend gathering the last pieces of evidence she needed. She traced financial records, interviewed other personnel who'd worked with Phillips's team, and documented everything meticulously. On Sunday night, Sarah laid out her dress white uniform, the one with all her real insignia, 4 stars on the shoulder boards, ribbons covering most of her chest, the gold stripes of a fleet commander. Tomorrow, they would learn exactly who they'd been trying to push out. Sarah arrived at Building 7 at 7:30 Monday morning, still wearing her plain khakis. She wanted to see how this would play out before revealing herself. The office was empty. She sat at her corner desk and waited. At 7:45, Phillips arrived. He stopped short when he saw her. "You're still here." "My orders haven't come through yet," Sarah said calmly. Phillips's jaw tightened. "They should have. I'll make some calls." He moved to his desk and picked up his phone, turning away from Sarah to speak in low tones. Chen and Rodriguez arrived together a few minutes later. They both looked surprised and unhappy to see Sarah. "I thought she was leaving," Rodriguez muttered to Chen. "So did I," Chen replied, not bothering to lower her voice. At exactly 8 o'clock, the office door opened. Commander Davis walked in, back early from his leave. He was a solid man in his 50s with gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. "Good morning, everyone," he said. Then he spotted Sarah. "You must be the lieutenant who's been filling in. Welcome." "Thank you, sir," Sarah said. Phillips stood up. "Commander, we were actually just discussing." The door opened again, interrupting him. 2 men in suits walked in, followed by 3 Navy security personnel. "Commander Davis," one of the suited men said, showing his credentials. "NCIS, we need everyone in this office to remain here. We have some questions." The color drained from Phillips's face. Chen's hand went to her mouth. Rodriguez looked like he might be sick. Commander Davis looked confused. "What's this about?" "We're investigating allegations of procurement fraud," the NCIS agent said. He looked at Sarah. "Lieutenant Mitchell." Sarah stood up. "Actually, it's Captain Mitchell." She looked directly at Phillips. "And we need to have a very long conversation about supply chain management." Phillips's mouth opened and closed. "Captain, but you said." "I said I was Lieutenant Mitchell. I was Lieutenant Mitchell 20 years ago. Things change." Chen found her voice. "This is some kind of setup. You came here to spy on us." "I came here to conduct a routine inspection," Sarah said, her voice calm but firm. "I go undercover to see how operations really run at the ground level. Usually, I find minor inefficiencies, maybe some outdated procedures. What I found here was significantly more serious." Commander Davis stepped forward. "Captain, I don't understand. What's happening?" Sarah turned to him. "Commander, did you authorize any supply requisitions for vendors called Summit Solutions or Pacific Procurement Services?" Davis frowned. "I don't recognize those names." "That's because they don't exist," Sarah said. "They're shell companies. For the past 3 years, your office has been ordering supplies at inflated prices from these fake vendors, then splitting the difference. The Navy has lost approximately $2 million. The room went silent. Davis looked at his 3 officers with dawning horror. "2 million," he whispered. The NCIS agent stepped forward. "Lieutenant Phillips, Lieutenant Chen, Lieutenant Rodriguez, you're going to need to come with us for questioning." Rodriguez suddenly bolted for the door. He made it 3 steps before one of the security personnel blocked his path. Within seconds, all 3 were being escorted out of the office. Chen crying, Phillips silent and pale, Rodriguez still trying to explain that this was all a misunderstanding. When they were gone, Davis sank into a chair. "I had no idea. Captain, you have to believe me, I trusted them. They ran this office for 3 years. The numbers always looked good. The audits always passed." "The audits passed because they were good at hiding it," Sarah said, not unkindly. "And because nobody was looking closely enough. That's going to change." Davis looked up at her. "My career is over, isn't it?" Sarah considered him. "That depends. Did you know or should you have known? NCIS will determine that. But Commander, you've been at this base for 20 years. Your record is spotless except for this. If you cooperate fully and help us understand how the system failed, that will count for something." Davis nodded, looking older than he had 5 minutes ago. "Who are you, really? I mean, what's your actual position?" Sarah finally allowed herself a small smile. "I'm Commander of Naval Surface Forces Pacific Fleet. I oversee operations for 60 ships and 40,000 personnel." Davis's eyes widened. "The entire Pacific Fleet?" "Surface forces, yes. And for the past 2 weeks, I've been sitting in that corner, filing papers and making coffee, while your 3 lieutenants treated me like an incompetent secretary." Despite everything, Davis almost laughed. They must have had a shock when NCIS walked in. "They made it easy," Sarah said. "When they tried to force me out, they confirmed their guilt. If they'd just let me finish my rotation and leave, I might not have dug deep enough to find everything." Over the next several hours, Sarah worked with NCIS and Commander Davis to piece together the full extent of the fraud. Davis, once he understood what had been happening under his command, was devastated but cooperative. He provided access to everything: files, computers, contact lists. By early afternoon, the investigation had expanded. 2 vendors had been arrested. A civilian contractor who'd helped set up the shell companies was being questioned. The scheme had been more extensive than Sarah had initially thought. She took a break and walked outside, needing fresh air and a moment to think. The base was busy with its normal Monday routine: sailors reporting for duty, ships being loaded, aircraft taking off in the distance. This was why she did these inspections. The Navy was full of good people doing hard work, but systems could fail, and humans could be corrupted. Her job was to find the failures before they became disasters. Her phone buzzed. A text from the base commander: "Press conference at 1600. Your call whether to attend." Sarah thought about it. She could slip away, return to her regular duties, let the base commander handle the publicity. That's what she usually did. But something made her reconsider. Those 3 officers had dismissed her, disrespected her, tried to push her out, not because she was incompetent, but because she was a threat to their scheme. How many other women in the Navy faced similar treatment? How many were doubted, underestimated, or ignored? The press conference was held in the base headquarters building at 4 o'clock. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, now wearing her dress white uniform with all her insignia clearly visible. The public affairs officer nearly dropped his clipboard when he saw her. "Captain Mitchell, I didn't know you were on base. Sir, I mean ma'am, I mean." "It's fine, Lieutenant," Sarah said with a slight smile. "I've been here for 2 weeks. I'm the one who uncovered the fraud." But the report said it was a Lieutenant Mitchell who..." Understanding dawned on his face. "Oh." The base commander, Rear Admiral James Porter, arrived moments later. He was a stocky man with white hair and sharp blue eyes. When he saw Sarah, he broke into a wide grin. "Sarah, I should have known you'd pull off something like this." He shook her hand warmly. $2 million in fraud. You've saved the taxpayers a fortune." "Just doing my job, Jim," Sarah said. They'd known each other for years and were friends when rank allowed. Still, going undercover in a supply office for 2 weeks, that's above and beyond. He lowered his voice. How bad was it? They treated me like I was invisible, Sarah said simply. Or worse, like I was incompetent. They gave me busy work, excluded me from everything, and tried to force me out when they got nervous. Porter's expression hardened. Because they were criminals trying to protect their scheme. Yes, but also because they saw a woman of a certain age with no visible rank, and they assumed I had nothing to offer. They never considered that I might be more than I appeared. Porter nodded slowly. There's a lesson in that. The press conference room was filling up with reporters from local news stations and military publications. Sarah and Porter took their seats at the table facing the cameras. Porter began by outlining the basics of the case. A multi-year fraud scheme, 3 officers arrested, approximately $2 million stolen from the Navy. Then he introduced Sarah. Captain Sarah Mitchell is commander of Naval Surface Forces Pacific Fleet, Porter said. She personally conducted the undercover investigation that exposed this fraud. Captain Mitchell. Sarah leaned forward to the microphone. The camera lights were bright, but she'd done this before. She kept her voice steady and clear. 2 weeks ago, I arrived at this base wearing plain khakis and a temporary ID badge. I told everyone I was Lieutenant Mitchell, a desk officer assigned to temporary duty. That was all true. I was a lieutenant once, and I have done desk work, but it wasn't the whole truth. She paused, making sure she had everyone's attention. For 2 weeks, I worked in a supply office alongside 3 officers who are now in custody. They treated me as someone beneath their notice. They gave me meaningless work. They excluded me from important tasks. And when I started asking questions, they tried to get rid of me. A reporter raised her hand. Captain, why go undercover? Why not just conduct an official inspection? Because people behave differently when they know they're being watched, Sarah explained. When I arrive as a 4-star captain, everyone stands at attention. Everything is perfect. I see what they want me to see. But when I arrive as someone they think doesn't matter, I see the truth. Another reporter. What was it like being treated that way? Disrespected, I mean. Sarah considered the question carefully. It was enlightening. These officers didn't disrespect me because I was incompetent. I have 20 years of experience and command 60 ships. They disrespected me because I appeared to be a middle-aged woman in a low-ranking position. They made assumptions based on appearance rather than ability. Do you think this is a widespread problem in the military? I think it's a widespread problem everywhere, Sarah said. We judge people by what we see on the surface. Age, gender, rank, position. We forget that everyone has a story. Everyone has skills and experience. The best leaders look deeper. Porter added, Captain Mitchell exemplifies this. She could have walked into that office in her dress whites and demanded answers. Instead, she did the hard work of understanding the system from the inside. That's leadership. The questions continued for another 30 minutes. Sarah answered honestly, but carefully, aware that every word would be quoted and analyzed. She talked about the importance of financial oversight, the dedication of the vast majority of Navy personnel, and the need for systemic reforms to prevent future fraud. When the press conference ended, Sarah stood in the hallway checking her phone. She had dozens of messages from colleagues, from other commanders, from friends she hadn't spoken to in years. One message made her smile. It was from Admiral Lisa Chen, the chief of naval operations and the highest-ranking woman in the Navy. Sarah just watched your press conference. Magnificently done. You've reminded everyone that wisdom and experience matter more than appearances. Proud to serve alongside you. Another message was from her daughter, Emma, a college student in California. Mom, you're trending on Twitter. Everyone's calling you a badass. Which you are. Love you. Sarah was still smiling when Commander Davis approached her. He looked exhausted. Captain, I wanted to apologize, he said quietly. Not just for what happened in my office, but for not being a better leader. I should have known what my people were doing. Sarah studied him. Commander, did you benefit financially from their scheme? No, ma'am. NCIS confirmed that this morning. I was just, he searched for the word, complacent. I trusted them to do their jobs and I didn't verify. I failed in my duty. Then learn from it, Sarah said. You're going to face an inquiry board. Be honest. Take responsibility. Show them you understand what went wrong and how to prevent it in the future. The Navy needs experienced officers like you, but only if you're willing to grow from your mistakes. Davis straightened a little. Yes, ma'am, thank you. As he walked away, Admiral Porter rejoined Sarah. You're too kind to him. He should have caught this. Maybe, Sarah agreed. But destroying his career won't undo the damage. What matters now is fixing the system and sending a message that fraud won't be tolerated. Porter nodded. Speaking of messages, yours came through loud and clear today. My phone's been ringing off the hook. Half the Navy wants to know if you're going to start showing up undercover at their commands. Sarah laughed. That would defeat the purpose, wouldn't it? I suppose. Still, you've put everyone on notice. People will be more careful now, knowing that any random lieutenant might actually be a fleet commander. Good, Sarah said. They should be careful. They should do their jobs with integrity, whether anyone's watching or not. 3 months later, Sarah stood on the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln, watching the sun rise over the Pacific Ocean. The aircraft carrier was her flagship, and she was exactly where she belonged. The fraud case had concluded swiftly. Phillips, Chen, and Rodriguez had all pleaded guilty and were sentenced to prison terms ranging from 5 to 8 years. They would also have to repay the stolen money, though Sarah doubted they'd ever come close to covering $2 million. The vendors and contractors involved had been prosecuted as well. The Navy had implemented new oversight procedures for supply chains, making it harder for similar schemes to succeed in the future. Commander Davis had faced his inquiry board. He'd been formally reprimanded, but allowed to remain in the Navy. He'd been reassigned to a less critical position, where his experience could be useful, but his oversight responsibilities were limited. Sarah had testified on his behalf, noting that while he'd failed in his duty, he'd shown genuine remorse and cooperated fully with the investigation. But the impact of the case had gone far beyond the immediate prosecutions. The story had resonated with people, not just in the military, but across the country. It had become a symbol of something larger, the danger of making assumptions about people based on age, gender, or appearance. Sarah had received hundreds of letters and emails. Many were from women who'd been underestimated in their careers. Some were from older workers who'd been pushed aside for younger colleagues. Others were from people who'd simply felt invisible and wanted to thank her for reminding the world that everyone matters. One letter in particular had moved her. It was from a 68-year-old woman named Margaret who worked as a cashier at a grocery store. Dear Captain Mitchell, it read, I've been working the same job for 12 years. Customers often ignore me, talk over me, or treat me like I'm not there. Sometimes I feel like I've become invisible just because I'm older. But watching you on the news reminded me that I still have value. My experience matters. My kindness matters. Thank you for showing the world that people like us still count. Sarah had written back to Margaret personally, thanking her for her letter and her service to her community. It was a small gesture, but it felt important. Now, standing on the carrier deck, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here. She'd joined the Navy at 22. Fresh out of the Naval Academy, full of ambition and idealism. She'd faced discrimination and doubt along the way, people who questioned whether a woman could lead in combat, whether a mother could balance family and career, whether someone her age could handle the demands of fleet command. She'd proven them all wrong, not by arguing but by doing the work, by showing up every day, by leading with integrity and competence, by never accepting that she was less than she was. Her executive officer, Commander Tom Harrison, joined her at the rail. Morning, Captain, beautiful sunrise. It is, Sarah agreed. I heard you're giving a talk at the Naval Academy next week, Harrison said, about leadership and undercover investigations. Sarah smiled. Something like that. They want me to talk about the Norfolk case. I'm going to tell them that real leadership isn't about rank or position. It's about character. It's about seeing people clearly and treating everyone with respect. The midshipmen will love that, Harrison said. Especially the women. You've become something of a role model, you know. I just did my job. You did more than that. You reminded everyone that appearances can be deceiving, that the person you ignore or underestimate might be more capable than you'll ever be. Sarah thought about Phillips, Chen, and Rodriguez sitting in their prison cells. She didn't take pleasure in their downfall, but she didn't regret it either. They'd stolen from the Navy and disrespected everyone around them. They'd earned their fate. But more importantly, their case had sparked conversations across the military about respect, oversight, and the dangers of assumptions. That was the real victory. Her phone buzzed. A message from Admiral Chen. Sarah, the Secretary of the Navy, wants to see you next month. Promoting you to Vice Admiral. Congratulations. Sarah stared at the message, then slowly smiled. 3 stars. Vice Admiral. It was an honor she dreamed about but never quite let herself believe would happen. She looked out at the ocean, at the dozen ships sailing in formation around the carrier. These were her ships, her sailors. She dedicated her life to leading them, protecting them, and ensuring that the Navy remained a force for good in the world. And she'd done it by being exactly who she was. A woman who refused to be invisible, who commanded respect through competence, and who knew that true strength came not from dominating others, but from lifting them up. You okay, Captain? Harrison asked, noticing her expression. Better than okay, Tom, Sarah said. Much better than okay. She took one last look at the sunrise, then turned and headed back inside. There was work to do, there was always work to do. Ships to coordinate, personnel to train, missions to plan. But now she would do it as Vice Admiral Mitchell. And somewhere in the Navy, there were probably young lieutenants who would underestimate her, dismiss her, or think she didn't belong. Sarah almost felt sorry for them, almost. They had no idea who they were dealing with. And one day, when it mattered, they would learn, just as Phillips, Chen, and Rodriguez had learned, that the quiet woman in the corner, the one they thought didn't matter, might just command the entire fleet.